Hi. Before we start, I want to set up one expectation. This is not a session about AI tools. It's about something much more important than that. It has actually how we think and work with AI in a musical context. Because the difference between random results and meaningful music is not the technology, it's the process behind it. So this is where I'm going to be covering for you today. AI is generating music faster than ever before. Tracks, arrangements, even full soundtracks in seconds. But here's the real question. Who is actually in control of the result? Because most people think AI is doing the creative work, but in reality, the difference between random outputs and great music comes down to something else entirely. Welcome to AI plus Human Music Curation Workflow Seminar. So I don't want this to be another talk about AI tools. So by the end of this session, you'll have four things. First, a clear workflow you can actually follow step by step. Second, you understand how to take the AI from random generation to intentional music results. Third, you'll see what the real role of the human is in the process and why that's becoming more important, not less. And finally, you'll walk away with something practical, a system you can start using immediately in your own music. Before we go step by step, I want you to see the entire system first. This is the workflow we're going to break down today. Now, at first glance, it might look like a pipeline. You start here and you end there. But that's not what's really happening. This is a loop. Every decision you make as a human feeds back into the system and changes what the AI produces next. So instead of thinking AI generates, I use, think of this. I guide, AI responds, and I refine. And this loop is where all the quality comes from. So it's important to understand, once you understand this loop, you stop using AI randomly and start using it intentionally. Everything in the workflow starts here, not with AI, but with the human decision. Before generating anything, we define what we want to feel, what we want to hear, and where the music is going to live. Because AI doesn't create direction, it just responds to it. So let's take a case study of one of my latest tracks, Staring Back, which is an orchestral piece. If I wanted to create the same track with AI, basically what would be the intent that I would use in order to guide the AI through it? Let's have a listen first. It was a tension built through the chromatic harmony, emotional ambiguity, and shifting tonal centers are the main characteristics of this piece. So that level of clarity changes everything. If I just said, generate cinematic music, I get something generic. But if I define harmonic language, emotional direction, and structural intent, now the output becomes usable. So most people skip this step and they go straight to generation. And that's why they get results that sounds okay, but don't mean anything. Let me give you another example, the contrast one. If you take another case, something like a lo-fi study track, if I define it properly, I would use warm textures, slow tempo, repetitive piano motif, and soft noise layer. So the AI has a clear target. But if I just say lo-fi, I get randomness. Now, once you define that intent, the AI generates options. And this is where things get interesting, because now you have to decide, what's actually good and what isn't. Now we move into what I believe is the most underrated part of the entire process, evaluation. Once the AI generates options, you're no longer prompting. You're listening, judging, and deciding. And this is where the real difference happens. At this stage, you're not a creator, you're a curator. And that's a completely different mindset. When I'm working on something like steering back, if I would not be asking, is this technically correct? I'm asking, does this harmony create tension? Does this transition feel intentional? Does this support the emotional arc? Because a lot of AI outputs will sound good, but very few will feel right, critical inside. So AI is extremely good at producing acceptable results, but your job is to find the meaningful ones. Concrete contrast examples of that I can give you is you might get 5 variations of a theme. One is clean but generic. One is interesting but messy. One has a unique moment but not consistent. Most people pick the clean one, but as a composer, you pick the one with potential and shape it further. Good music is not selected because it's perfect. It's selected because it's promising. This is where taste becomes your biggest asset. Because the AI doesn't know context or story or intention, only you do. So if I give you 10 AI-generated tracks, could you confidently pick the best one, or would you pick the safest one? The difference is everything. Now, once you start selecting consistently, something interesting begins to happen. The system starts learning from your decisions, and that takes us to the next step, how the model actually adapts. Now we move into a part that feels the most technical, but I'm going to keep it very simple. This is where the AI system starts to adapt. And there are 2 important layers to understand. Layer number 1 is the pre-trained knowledge. The AI already knows music. It understands harmony, rhythm, structure, and style patterns. That's what we call the pre-trained model. So you're not starting from zero. Layer number 2 is fine-tuning. This is the key. But there's where it gets interesting, because the AI doesn't know you. It doesn't know your taste, your aesthetic, your musical priorities, and so forth. And that's what fine-tuning is about. Connect to previous step. Every time you select something, or every time you reject something, you're teaching the system more like this, less like that. Music-based example I can give you is, if I consistently select rich harmonic textures, chromatic movement, and orchestral layering, over time the system starts favoring those decisions. It becomes aligned with my musical language. So the AI doesn't generate music, it learns your taste. It doesn't mean that the AI becomes creative. It means the AI becomes better at responding to your decisions. Think of it like working with an assistant composer. At first, they guess, but over time, they start anticipating what you want. The more intentional your selections are, the better the system learns. If your decisions are random, the AI becomes random. So the question is, are you training the AI or confusing it? Now, once the system starts adapting, we reach the most visible part of the process generation. The part where everyone talks about, but very few actually control. This is the part where everyone gets excited about, generation. You press a button and music appears. Melodies, harmonies, textures, all produced in seconds. And yes, it's impressive. But here's the key idea. This is execution, not intelligence. The AI is recognizing patterns, recombining structures, and applying learned styles. It's not asking, what should this piece express, or where is the emotional arc going? Use your music as contrast, for example, and try to understand exactly how that works in your musical context. Let's use another example, one of my pieces, Okavango River, that if we take that piece and we wanted to generate it with AI, basically what would be our intentions with regards to that. Let's have a listen to the original piece first. So here there is a very specific intention, okay? We have atmosphere, we have a gradual development, and we have orchestral expansion of a simple motif. That doesn't come from generation, that comes from direction. So AI can give you something that sounds like music, but it doesn't know why it exists, where it's going, and what it means. AI generates possibilities, but humans create the purpose. If I have another example, you might generate 10 variations. All of them sound correct. All of them are usable, but only one fits your vision. And this is a common mistake. This is where many people get stuck. They generate and generate and generate, hoping the perfect track will appear, but without direction. Generation actually becomes noise. The power is not in the generating more, it's in generating better inputs based on your intent and your previous decisions. How many times have you generated something and thought, this sounds good, but it's not quite it? The gap is where your role begins. Now, so if the generation gives us possibilities, what actually improves the results over time? What we call the loop, the feedback, the learning from what we keep and what we reject. This is where the real power of the system appears, not in generation, but in iteration. Every time you go through the cycle, you define intent, you generate options, and you select what works. And then the system updates. This is not repetition, this is refinement. This is actually how we already work as composers. You don't write a piece in one pass. You sketch, then you adjust, refine, reorchestrate, and AI just accelerates that loop. The better your decisions, the better the system becomes. Over time, something interesting happens. The AI outputs start to feel more aligned, not because the AI is more creative, but because it is adapting to your taste. It's like training your ear. At first, everything sounds similar, but over time, you start hearing differences, making better choices, and refining faster. That's exactly what this loop does. But there's a catch. If your decisions are inconsistent, the system doesn't improve. It becomes unpredictable. Practical example is if one day you select cinematic orchestral texture and the next day generic pop loops without intention, you're not training the system, you're confusing it. So ask yourself, are you refining your process or just repeating it? And this loop, when used correctly, leads to something very different from random tracks. It leads to a cohesive result, a curated outcome, something that it is intentional. So for a simplification of this loop, basically is the sequence of the different steps that I'm showing here. It's define, generate, select, refine, repeat, and go back to define until you get the results you want. So at the end of this process, we don't just get music, we get something much more valuable, coherence. A set of tracks that belong together, that serves a purpose, that reflects a clear intention. Because the goal was never to generate more, it was to create something meaningful. As a closing statement, if there's one thing you take from this session it's that the advantage is not the tool, it's how you use it, and more importantly, how you think about it. Because if everything can be generated, what actually makes something valuable? And the answer is not the tool, it's the person using it. The difference between noise and meaning is not what the AI produces, it's what you choose to keep. It's your decisions, your taste, and your directions. That's what shapes the results. As composers, producers, and creators, we've always worked in iterations. We sketch, we refine, we adjust until something comes right. AI doesn't replace that process. It accelerates it, but the responsibility stays with us. So the real question is not, can AI create music? It clearly can. The real question is, can you guide it? Can you recognize what matters? And can you turn your possibilities into purpose? Because the future of music is not human or AI. It's human through AI. And if you can master that workflow, you don't just keep up with the future, you also shape it. Good luck, and I would like to hear your thoughts about it. Put it up in the comments sections. Thank you very much for watching.